Tror jeg vi kan starte. Skal fortelle litt om ATF-erfaringer som vi har fra Yara. Jeg heter Aleksandar Seculic og kommer fra Yara IT. Jobber i avdeling som er ansvarlig for Global Service-desken og verktøyet som er brukt av Service-desken, som i dette tilfellet er ServiceNow. Vi Yara vil lage presentasjoner i engelsk, fordi engelsk er formelt språk, så jeg skal hoppe over til engelsk. Det blir litt lettere for meg å holde presentasjonen og slippe å oversette det hele tiden, men hvis det er noe uklart, bare stoppe meg. Så jeg kan prøve å forklare hva er tidligere. Today I will say a few words about Yara, about ServiceNow at Yara, before I get over to the ATF in Yara with motivation, usage, experiences, and some practical tips. Yara is a mineral fertilizer company, one of the actually biggest in the world. We have like around 16 or actually more than 16,000 employees already by now. We are operating in more than 160 countries around the world, and in 2019 we had like around 94 billion NOK in revenue. A bit more about our size, impact, and activities. What we estimate is that we are contributing to feeding more like than 240 million of people around the world. We collaborate with around 20 million farmers in the world. We have almost 11,000 of retail outlets. We are operating in more than 60 countries in the world, and we have a huge number of agronomists on the ground. And recently we have also been selected or ranked number 10 in the Fortune's list of the companies changing the world list. So that was short about Yara. So now a bit more about ServiceNow at Yara. We started in 2017. We started with the ITSM suite. In the meantime, we have onboarded CSM suite, and currently we are evaluating, or we have a number of initiatives evaluating some other suites to be onboarded in Yara. So the word about ServiceNow is spreading throughout the company. Currently we have 4 portals. One is IT Service Portal. The other one is the Corporate Service Portal, the portal which we use for the business-related requests, whereas on the IT Service Portal we use it for IT-related requests. In addition to it, we have a Center of Excellence portal, which is used in Brazil, and also CSM portal, which is used on the Brazil market. So how did we start with ATF in Yara? We started with our upgrades, which took approximately 4 to 6 weeks. And then if you think that basically you need to do 2 upgrades during the year, that basically ends up to quite some time during the year. So then we decided to do something, and we started a listing of the potential activities, and one of those things was ATF. And that is how we have started and got involved with the ATF. In addition to this, basically we have identified a number of the activities that helped us in order to shorten our upgrade time, like standardization of the plans, standardization of the checklists, proper preparation based on the release notes review, and even standardization of the upgrade months, which is allowing us to book the resources well in advance. And we are always following these upgrades with lessons learned activity, which is helping us to identify what was well and what was not so well, in order to identify the actions for the further improvement. So today our upgrades are taking 6 days. So basically from 6 weeks to 6 days we managed to cut our upgrades, and one of important contributors to this shortening of the upgrade time was or is ATF. So now a bit more about the usage. We have configured ATF for the ITSM suite. It is in pipeline for the CSM suite. Of course, when you are introducing ATF, you need to count with the time because it takes time to configure it. And especially also it takes time to think about what kind of the tests and the test scenarios you want to configure in the ATF for your processes. And of course, for the more complex processes, it takes longer time to configure, whereas for the less complex, it takes less time. Of course, you have out-of-the-box ATFs, but we developed our own ATFs from the scratch based on the identified scenarios, and we use those out-of-the-box ATFs for the reference. The reason for this is it is to have the let's say the right foundation for these configured ATFs to be aligned with our ITSM processes. But once they are configured, they are easy to use. So basically a short training and then the resources are kind of quite ready to start using it. So now a bit about experiences so far. With the help of ATF, we have significantly reduced the user UAT, user acceptance testing. And then today UAT with all the defect fixing takes no more than 3 days, actually 2.5 days at max. We have also got a feedback that our developers are kind of using it very often also to do the unit testing, which is basically adding up to the same time by the ATF. Of course, you need to count on the time, basically when it comes to the configuration and also when it comes to the maintenance of the ATF, especially if you are introducing new or changed functionalities into your process. Basically, then you need to count on maintenance of your ATF configurations of the affected test scenarios. That takes both the time for the configuration and also the time for the verification and the testing. This kind of the work is, let's say, less intense once your processes are more mature and stable, because in that case you do not have that often the changes in the functionalities or bigger changes to the functionalities, which is basically making it easier to maintain the ATF configurations, and then the overall time spent on the ATF it is less than optimized. But all of these basically investment when it comes to the time pays out at the upgrades and also pays out when we are doing the testing during the year, depending on the let's say different introduction of the different functionalities in the system. So finally, a bit more about the practical tips. Before you start developing or using ATF, it is highly recommended that the developers or the configurators are sent to the ServiceNow training in order to do it correctly from the beginning. It is also really important to follow the ServiceNow best practice, meaning to use the shorter tests instead of end-to-end testing, which can, if you have a lot of, let's say, end-to-end tests in configure for a process, then you actually end up with a lot of overlappings and testing over and over of one and the same functionality, which is not that much effective and efficient. Also important to agree on the naming convention, because you will have probably a number of the users using the ATF, and it would be good that they are kind of understand what ATF test scenarios they are supposed to use and what these test scenarios are basically doing in the system. And also to try and avoid creating the records in the system tables, but actually perform these activities directly from the ATF. This actually helps you to keep your system clean and under control. Do not impersonate users, but use the functionality which is called create user step in the ATF. This is especially because the users which you might use in your ATFs eventually tend to kind of be inactive, and then your ATFs can fail. Also important thing to remember to add the waiting condition for the server-side steps, because these activities in the test scenarios kind of get executed quite quickly. And if there is, if let's say following activity is starting before the previous activity has been completed, it can contribute to the ATF or the test to the fail. So it's important to consider this, especially for server-side steps. Also remember to validate to use the record validation to do the validation after the record inserts. This is just to make sure that really the records, if they were supposed to be inserted somewhere in the database, they are really inserted. And ensure that you have the tasks for the maintenance of or the update of your ATF in relation to your development activities with the processes are actually taken care of. So in order to keep your ATF up to date, it's very easy to forget to maintain the ATF as the new functionalities and the changes to existing functionalities are introduced onto the process. And then soon you will figure out that your ATFs are obsolete. So this was in short about ATFs in Yara and our experiences and some tips from our own usage.
Alex?
So, yes.
A couple of questions. So can you say a little bit more about impersonation? Yeah. So someone was asking why not impersonate a user with a generic test user?
Why not impersonate?
Why not impersonate a user with a generic test user?
Yeah, okay, that's also possible. That's possible, but you know, if something changes or happens to that test user, basically you're running the risk that the ATF or the test in ATF might fail. And it's actually a recommended practice by ATF is to use this create user step in the ATF, and then you do not need to worry about, let's say, about the user.
Right. Thank you. And another question is, approximately how many ATF tests do you have that you are maintaining?
We have, let's say, one we call it suite, which is configured per each of the ITSM processes that we are using. This suite consists of the number of the test scenarios, and each of the test scenarios consists of the number of the test cases. So for, let's say, less complex processes like standard service request, it's basically not that many scenarios that we have configured, but let's say for the change management process, then we have number of the scenarios which are configured in the suite. So it all depends on the complexity of the process.
A follow-up to the impersonation question: do you delete the newly created user after that? I guess that.
If you use this create user step in ATF, you do not need to worry about that. But if you create a user just for the purpose of the ATF, then you need kind of to take care of that user, so nothing happens to that user by any let's say developer, because if they change something to that user, that might affect your test case.
All right. There was also a question about test management and ATF. If we are to combine that in a future release of ServiceNow, and that is something that is not something we are aware of at this point. That doesn't mean that it won't happen, but there are no concrete plans that we can communicate on that at this point in time.
Tusen takk til alle som presenterte. Det var veldig interessant og spennende å høre. Både presentasjonen fra ServiceNow og fra Yara. Alltid interessant å høre hva andre kunder gjør. Vi i DNB har også jobbet en del med ATF-er. Vi har ganske mange, men sliter med å holde dem oppdatert og prioritere tid til det. Så ja, veldig interessant å høre. Takk for presentasjoner. Og takk dere som deltok i dag. Og det var aktiv deltakelse. Fint å få spørsmål og feedback. Denne gangen har vi valgt å ikke kjøre en survey, men neste gang skal vi prøve å ha noen survey aktivt mens vi presenterer. Så skal prøve noe nytt. Som jeg sa i begynnelsen, det veldig fint om det flere som vil presentere på stang neste gang. Så bare ta kontakt med en av oss.